1941, the war had just begun. The Germans had the biggest ship that had the biggest gun. The Bismarck was the fastest ship that ever sailed the sea. On her decks were guns as big as steers and sails as big as trees.
Okay, some of you may remember that old song from 1960 by Johnny Horton, Sink the Bismarck. And it came out the same time as the film of the same name, a British black and white film, and very well done indeed. The game we're going to look at, though, is the 1962 version of Bismarck, done by Avalon Hill. Now, when we're looking at the pieces to this game, keep in mind what the gaming hobby was like in 1962. There really was no wargaming hobby. People at that time were playing games like Monopoly and Scrabble, and maybe the kids were playing Snakes and Ladders. Now, Charles Roberts, a young entrepreneur, was trying to get a company going called Avalon Hill, and he was producing games like Gettysburg and Tactics 2. Those were the first two games done by Avalon Hill. So when he did Bismarck in 1962, it was kind of a novel game in itself, because it was a naval game. So as we look at the pieces to this game, keep that in mind, that the hobby, as we know it, didn't really exist. There was no large wargaming conventions. The hobby press hasn't been created. It didn't become the big industry that it is today. So let's take a look at the pieces to Avalon Hill's Bismarck, made in 1962. Now, the Avalon Hill boxes at this time period pretty well all had a standard format. They had these little wee dividers here to keep the box stiff, I guess. Bismarck came with rules that would be laughably simple today. You just got this rules folder, and most of that is just credits. So you're talking 1, 2, 3 pages of rules. I mean, that is simple. And it's interesting that as I read the rules today, some of the rule sections are actually kind of repetitive. You could almost get this down to two pages of rules. So Bismarck is definitely a simple game, but it is a good game. You also got this historical commentary card and notes telling you about the real campaign and some examples of play for the battle board, which we'll get to. You also got a little wee hit record pad. This way you kept track of hits on the ships when you played on the battle board, and a miniature of the search board, which is kind of neat. The turn record was standard for the time. You used a pencil and checked off the time as it occurred. You got these little zone cards, which, well, didn't really need to be included in the game. I always thought they were kind of a curiosity. They were used on a search board, but as I explain the game, you'll see that they're kind of redundant. You've got the search board counters here. All they had was the name of the vessel and its speed. And of course you had the battle board counters. And we'll take a look at those closer in a moment. Now, you've got 2 boards in the box, which was novel for the time. The search board and the battle board. And you got this screen, so you could divide the 2 boards so that the British player playing on this side and the German player playing on the other side wouldn't be able to see each other's ships. Simple but very effective method of hidden movement. And of course, when ships met in the same sea zone and came to battle, they would fight it out here on the battle board, and you take your battle board counters and fight it out. The setup for the game was right on the board, which was handy. You didn't have to go to consult charts and stuff. They were right there. You had your search board tables were also on the board, and the battle board also had its tables embossed right on. And well, just to comment on the box artwork, they had, original artwork for the time. It later became in vogue to use a black and white photograph or some other picture source, but in this version they had an artist draw a picture of the Bismarck. But how did the game work? Let's see how it generally worked. Okay, now in playing the game, the setup would have been something like that. We have the British forces set up here on the left and the Germans on the right. And of course, neither side would be able to see each other because of the search board screen there. Now for purposes of the video, we'll remove the screen so I can show you a little bit how the search procedure works. Of course, players do not see each other's forces. And we'll just turn it so we can see that the British forces a bit better. Now on turn 1, the Bismarck is allowed to move from the port of Bergen 0 to 6 squares. So quite often the Bismarck would sort of break out up here into the Iceland Faroes section, let's say going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, kind of thing like that. Or he might just go 1 or 2 to fool the British. But what would happen is the German would move, then the British would move his forces, and then he would call out these areas. Areas are A5 and zones are A5C. So the British would move his forces, let's say here and here, and then he'd call out the areas, and if the Germans were in the same area, he would have to inform the British that he was. Let's say for the sake of argument, the Bismarck had moved here. So the British would have called out area A6. The German would have had to reply, yeah, I'm in A6A. Now that's where these little wee cards came into play. You had a little procedure whereby the German picked the card he was in, and he showed the British player that he was in that square. It was kind of redundant to me. You just had to say, well, look, you're in A6, I happen to be in A6A. That's all. So these really had no function. That's in essence what the game was all about. It was a search and destroy game. The Germans are trying to elude the British, break out into the Atlantic. The game ended when the Bismarck could enter the ports of Bergen, Brest, or Ferrol, and they had to do that after a certain date, of course. They also could win by points by sinking convoys, and that was completely random chance on this search board chance table. Either player could roll it, and if the German player had rolled a 1, he would have got 2 points for sinking an Allied convoy. And if the roll was 2, 3, 4, 5, British air reconnaissance would sight the Bismarck. So it was very simple, and this chance table was heavily weighted in favor of the British. I think if I was designing the game today, I would probably modify this table a little bit. I found it a little too easy to find the Bismarck in the game. But that's neither here nor there. It was a fine game for its time. Also, historical forces that were later added could be brought in. Force H from the Mediterranean could move after they could move after May 25th. And again, you'd keep track of your time here by checking off a box every time you moved. The shaded turns represented night. The search board was a lot of fun. That was kind of the essence of the game. But if the Bismarck ended up in the same square as battleships, then you went to the battle board procedure. If the Bismarck was just in the same square as cruisers, you did not. Cruisers didn't fight the Bismarck, only battleships. So let's take a look at the battle board as if a typical battle had occurred. Actually, before we do that, let's take a look at the counters. You can see that they were kind of a standard Avalon Hill fare for the time. They were the shiny counters, and they just merely had the name of the vessel on it and the speed on the search board. So there's the Kenya, the Hermione, the Galatea. There's the carrier, Victorious. The battleships were marked merely with a B, giving their speed. And of course, there's the famous Bismarck. Incidentally, they didn't include the heavy cruiser Prince Eugen, which we know was with the Bismarck. Being a cruiser, I guess the designers felt it wasn't really necessary, so they edited it out. The board was, basic, black and white, nothing really outstanding there, but it was certainly serviceable. Well, the game was redone in 1977, and for those of you who are curious about that, I did a review called Games that I Don't Play, and I included the Gettysburg 1977 edition in that. Not that it was a bad game, mind you, but if you see the video, you'll see why I kind of didn't play it very much. And here's a little bit closer view of the hit record pad. You can see there's a miniature of the board on there, and you can actually plot your move right on the map if you wanted to, which was kind of cool. And the hit record pad. Bow turrets, secondary armament, stern turrets, and midships. That's the way you kept track of damage on the battle board. Let's take a look at the battle board. Okay, the battle board was very simple. And what happened when you had an encounter, you placed the Bismarck in the center of the board, and intercepting British ships were placed at the edge of the board. Now in this case, just for the sake of argument, we'll have the Bismarck here in the middle, and we'll have the Hood and Prince of Wales encounter the Bismarck. Now movement was very simple. You just literally moved one or two squares. Facing didn't matter. So you could have the Bismarck, let's say, move here, and the Hood and Prince of Wales might close, and then you might have combat. And all that mattered was really the facing direction for the guns. So in this case, only the rear turrets of the Bismarck would be able to be brought to bear against the Prince of Wales and the Hood. Let's take a closer look. It would help if I put the right ship on. I have the Vermillies on there. There's the Hood and the Prince of Wales. They were sort of top silhouettes of the ships. They're okay, well done for the time period. And of course, if you brought your broadside to bear, for example there, you'd be able to fire more guns. There's the Bismarck's hit record. So she brought her entire broadside to bear. She could fire all her stern turrets, secondary armament, and the bow. So facing direction made a difference. If the Bismarck met the bow on, she'd only be able to fire her bow turrets. And of course the same conditions applied for the Prince of Wales and the Hood. So you had a kind of a small tactical battle fought out here. Of course each of these squares would actually represent thousands of yards, since battleships could really fire at each other from like 12 miles away. Each of these squares is quite large. And your battle results table was here. And you also had a chance table that was different than the one on the search board, because the Bismarck doesn't necessarily want to stick around and fight British battleships. She really wants to get away. So there was a chance on the chance table that the Bismarck might escape, or she might be torpedoed by carriers if they were nearby on the search board. So there was a whole little sub-game here on the battle board, and it worked fairly well. Now remember, at the beginning of the video we showed you the rules booklet. You know, we're talking 3 pages of rules here, so we're not talking, you know, advanced rules. There isn't a lot more I can say about the game, except I still like it. I think it ages fairly well, even playing it, what, we're talking like over 50 years ago this game was designed. I mean, half a century. And it's still fun to play. I still like it. Is it dated by today's standards? Well, sure. I mean, I'd like to see a few things added, like maybe fuel consumption on the search board. In the original rules, you could just move wherever you wanted, as fast as you wanted. So I would have liked things like maybe fuel consumption and a few other things. But I didn't want to overly complicate the game. So the new 77 edition adds all kinds of new things. Search by the Germans from Norway. It's got fuel consumption in there. It's got weather. It's got more glitz, more, you know, more rules. But you know, I don't think it's a better game. This one caught the essence of the campaign and was a lot of fun to play. So I really won't say anything more about Bismarck. If you get a chance to pick it up, do so. I think it's a very good game. Thank you for watching.